Hi, this is Mike Tatarski, and welcome to episode 3 of the Vietnam Weekly podcast. This week, I'm talking to two people involved in helping out people in the city who are really hurting during the lockdown amid Vietnam's worst, by far, COVID outbreak. It's become clear that a lot of day workers, street food vendors, lottery ticket sellers, those sorts of people are really hurting under these restrictions with most things closed and travel difficult. So I wanted to talk about what's being done to help these people and how listeners can potentially help. So I was joined in two separate interviews by Damien Roberts, Executive Director of Saigon Children, and Kelly Vaugh, Philanthropy Services Outreach Head at the LIN Center, both based here in the city. So we talked about what people need, what these organizations are doing to help, and how listeners can potentially help as well. So I hope you take a lot away from this. I'm here with Damien Roberts, Executive Director of Saigon Children, a major charity organization here in Ho Chi Minh City. Damien, thanks for joining me today.
Good morning. Pleasure.
Yeah, so I just shared your name and title, but why don't you go ahead and tell listeners a bit more about what you do in Saigon Children?
Yeah, sure. I've been with Saigon Children for about 3.5 years now. We're an education charity. We've been here for about 30 years. We're registered in the UK, but all of our staff are here in Saigon. There's about 30 of us, and we are at the moment spending a lot of time focused on COVID relief. In a normal year, we'd be doing a little bit less emergency appeal and a little bit more building schools and providing vocational training and education for kids around the country.
Yeah, I've been familiar with your work for Saigon Children's work for some time now, an incredible organization. But you mentioned the COVID reliefs. That's what I want to focus on today, given where we are right now. So over the last few days, we were discussing before we started recording that this lockdown here is obviously a hard lockdown, which for you and I is unpleasant, but we can get through it. But for many is a lot harder. So what have you kind of been seeing since this started last week with your work?
Yeah, obviously we've been in sort of COVID situation for a year and a half, which seems crazy, but true. But yeah, at the moment, this is obviously the toughest phase of the entire time for Vietnam. And obviously the most recent outbreak, the cases are so much higher than they have been at any time in the past. So for us, it's been a real challenge. It's usually we're aiming to help a couple of thousand children every month, and of course, as the outbreak has hit and as the restrictions have tightened, it's meant that a lot of people are unable to work. They're unable to leave the house very easily, and of course, when you're already fairly disadvantaged and you're living below or close to the poverty line, it only takes a couple of days of not having any income before you're suffering, fairly dire consequences. So for us, it's been very much a case of urgent support to those poorest families. Initially, we were helping up in the north in Bac Giang, where there was a significant outbreak not that far from Hanoi, for those who don't know. But of course, now our focus has swung back down south to Ho Chi Minh City, which has been the real focus of the recent outbreak.
And so I saw on your website. Okay, so yeah, like you said, initially Baxiang, and all the attention initially across the board, it seemed, was up north for the first month or so when this started in late April, and obviously has shifted dramatically. So I've seen on your website that you're accepting donations for these COVID backpacks. Do you want to share a little bit about what those are?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, my team would kill me if I didn't. So, yeah, the website is covid.saigonchildren.com. That's our emergency appeal web link. You can go on there and see everything. But essentially, what we're doing is last year we called up about 1,500 families at the start of the pandemic restrictions because we were very much focused on finding out what they needed rather than telling them what we thought they needed. And they said back then, we just need food. We need food to get through the next month. So that's what we did. This year, again, we didn't want to assume. So we got back in touch with just over 1,000 families this time. And we said, okay, in the new restrictions, what is, your need? What is it that's causing you stress? What is your biggest kind of risk factor right now? And again, a lot of them came back and they said food. But what was interesting is this time they said, and also, the children, they're really suffering. They're feeling isolated. They're, not seeing their friends. They're not able to study, and this is really stressful for them. So this time we combined food, a lot of food. Average family will receive about a month's supply of food. So it's 30 kilograms of rice each, kilograms of canned fish and canned meat and various other, reasonably expensive ingredients, which will help them get through a month. But we're also giving books, games, toys for the kids, and also that's proved really popular, a guide for parents on supporting their kids' mental well-being, because it's something that the kids themselves have said has been stressful, and it's something the parents have recognized is also, a challenge. So we're bundling these all up in COVID backpacks. I think the price for each is about $60. So a very modest sum for feeding a family of four for a month and getting them
Yeah.
through the worst of the stresses. So you can go to our website, you can make a donation by credit card, our bank details are there. And the other thing that we're doing, which is part of the broader COVID appeal, is you can actually record yourself telling a story. So there's lots of very lovely people, including a few Vietnamese celebrities and the British Consul General in Ho Chi Minh City, reading children's stories, either video or audio recording, so that we can send those round to our many thousands of families and they can have, the enjoyment of a story at home as well. So it doesn't have to be money, although obviously we will put it to good use if
Sure.
we can.
Okay, that's great. So that really interested in that you mentioned the mental health kind of guide or tips. I mean, that's obviously a huge issue, not just here but around the world during the pandemic, especially during periods like this. And kids haven't been in school for a month at least. Can't really go outside to play, and if they live in a tiny house or tiny apartment or something, there's not much space. So what kind of is in that guide? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the thing is, I think, okay, so the schools are currently closed as part of the normal academic calendar here in Vietnam. They should be due to reopen in the not too distant future. Remains to be seen whether that's going to be the case, but the schools have been closed for several months over the last year. So, of course, all the kids are missing out on education. But, perhaps more importantly, many of them are not seeing their friends, and they're not allowed to go out and play. And most of our kids, they're not living in a house. They're not even living in an apartment. Most of them are living in a room, maybe two rooms if they're lucky, with family. And so, people are almost literally on top of each other in their homes. They're unable to leave. If they do leave, you know what the situation is when you get outside. You could be challenged. Why are you out? You're allowed maybe a trip to the shop once a day. And of course, for the children, there's no reason for them to be out. And so they're expected to stay at home day after day, week after week. And it is incredibly stressful. Most of the kids that we support, they don't have a lot of money. And so they're not online with their friends, chatting and gaming and all of these things. So they don't really have an outlet. And so that was why the books, the toys, the games, just to help them pass the time and bring a smile to their face was super important. Um, for the mental well-being guide that we gave to parents, it's relatively basic stuff. It's the sort of stuff that perhaps you might have, you might be more likely to hear in other countries. It's not so widespread here in Vietnam yet. Parents are extremely loving, but they don't necessarily know, how do I speak to my kid to ask them how they're feeling, what are their concerns and their worries, how can I help kind of alleviate their kind of worry or their sadness or anything like that. So it's about getting the parents engaged with the kids. It's about getting them playing with the kids and spending time talking to the kids and drawing out their kind of feelings and helping them with even practical stuff, just breathing exercises. So it's not super complex, but it's really important. And the feedback we've had over the last, I think, 5 weeks now that we've been doing this appeal has been really, really good. And it's just really interesting to me that from last year, it was okay, 100% of people said we really need food. And this year, a year and a half into the pandemic, obviously people's kind of perceptions and experience have changed. They're like, of course, we still need food. We need to eat. We have no money. But they're also saying, I'm seeing the effect on my kids. And that is another thing that's worrying me. And of course, our job at Saigon Children is to do whatever we can to keep kids safe, secure, happy in education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned that again. You've been doing obviously this work for a while now, but with the mental health, particularly in the last few days, that's kind of changed significantly. Prior to Thursday night, most things were closed, but we could still go outside freely and safely, but there were not really restrictions on movement around the city. So we're on recording this on Tuesday, so day 5 of the hard lockdown. What have you seen change since then, specifically in terms of families you're talking to, or even your team being able to move around the city and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, you say it's day 5 of the lockdown, and I'm like, how is it not day 12, day
I know,
13
I
already?
know.
I actually read your newsletter yesterday. It said we're on day 4, and I told my wife, and she went, "Are we not one week in? I thought we were one week in. What's going
Yeah,
on?"
right.
So even for us, this is time is dragging. It's
Mm-hmm.
extremely difficult. If you exercise or socialize, those things are pretty much off the table. But for us, we're trying to deliver thousands and thousands of packages, So I think something like, I guess maybe 120 tons of rice, and, scores of tons of other suppliers. And we're trying to distribute those to something like 2,000 different locations around the city.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's virtually impossible. You're not allowed to get a group of more than 2 people together. And of course, the rules come down from central government level, and to some extent, they're open to interpretation at the district level.
Yeah.
Something I know you've seen and I've seen reported in the news. And I think some districts that we were hoping we could deliver goods, they've had what I guess you could say was an abundance of caution,
Mm.
and they basically said to us, no, you can come back after the 15 days of lockdown, then you can do
Mm.
your deliveries. But of course, when you're trying to give food to people who are unable to work, unable to feed themselves,
Mm-hmm.
waiting 15 days until things get slightly better is not an option.
Right.
So we're continuing to negotiate with various authorities to make sure we can get some support to their localities. But we're focusing on the districts where uh, our local authority partners have said, yes, we will support you. But what it means is rather than having maybe 2 or 3 locations, and our team would be there generally, 4 or 5 of them to help distribute and administer the distribution and make sure that everyone gets what they're entitled to. And, we can chat to them about any other issues they may be having and support we can offer. I think we've had to deliver to 30 different locations,
Mm.
which means, logistically it's a lot tougher.
Mm-hmm.
We're not able to physically have staff standing over and kind of monitoring the distribution. So we've had to work very closely with trusted local partners in each of the districts in the city, just so that we can make sure that everybody is getting, what they need. So
Mm-hmm.
that's been pretty tough. And of course, it's all the uncertainty. And, we've bought our food in bulk from wholesalers because that's the way we can make sure that every dollar we get donated has the biggest possible impact. But of course, we're buying from wholesalers, and then they're dealing with distributors, and then they're dealing with drivers, and then the drivers are dealing with us. But we have to deal with a local partner, and the local partner is coordinating with the local police. So if somebody says, "Oh, by the way, can you move the delivery by half an hour?" 6 phone calls
Mm.
take place for that to happen, and that's happening for 30 different locations. So the
Right.
complexity is huge. My team, obviously, like all of us, is trying to stay at home as much as possible for their personal health and also for the kind of the good of the whole city, trying to slow the spread of COVID. So of course we're trying to make sure we stay at home, but we do have we got a nod from I think it was the Deputy Prime Minister who came down and said that local charities and international charities should continue to deliver their work safely. So I have a letter which all of my staff have got, which they can show to police if they're stopped
Okay.
in the city. So they have a copy of the letter, a copy of their ID,
Oh,
and they can
interesting.
say, I'm doing official work and it comes under this extra directive. And so we can do stuff, but of course, we don't want to be moving around the city too much because of the
Sure.
risk.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, out of curiosity, are there any districts in particular that have a lot of need? Or, I mean, obviously, different districts have different socioeconomic situations. What are kind of the most, at risk or locations, if you would?
Yeah, so I think we started working first and continued to work in Govap district. So that was a part of fairly central Ho Chi Minh City, which had an early outbreak and an early lockdown. So many of the families there have been, under, um, you know, really tight restrictions for coming up for 5 weeks now, I think. So of course, the economic impact on those people who have no savings and rely on kind of cash income every day is really, quite challenging. So GoVap is one of the areas we've been working. But to be honest, the picture is very similar across the whole of Ho Chi Minh City, with few exceptions, because everywhere in the city there is a significant population who are at or below the poverty line. So I think at the moment, District 8 is one of the big areas we've been focusing. It's a fairly poor district. They've been hit hard by COVID. The restrictions are very tight. The wholesale market's closed down. So it's a big challenge. So we continue to focus on GoVap, continue to focus on District 8. But as I say, um, 30 different locations, including, right up to Cu Chi in the north and right down to Kanya in the far south. So we were shipping literally by barge yesterday, a couple of 100 kilograms of rice across the river
Oh, wow.
to Kanya.
Hmm.
Because I mean, if I'm sure you've probably been cycling down in Kenya, there's very little there, but there are
Hmm.
people and they don't have a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, a real big focus, real big job at the moment.
Okay. And part of this may be a bit of a dumb question, but for people, we read about street vendors being shut down or, your local pho place being shut down, which if you like eating there is obviously unfortunate, but a lot of those types of people basically rely on, you kind of referred to this already, but what they make from the day, and that goes towards the next day's expenses, and there's very little safety net. So kind of in a tangible way, like if somebody's banh mi cart, they can't push it around the streets anymore selling banh mi. Like, what impact does that have on their daily life?
I mean, it's ruinous. It's, most of the families we're supporting are those who have got a food cart. They might sell noodles at the gates of the factory.
Mm.
They might be lottery ticket sellers. They might be delivery drivers. They're kind of informal, semi-skilled construction workers. So none of these people have a contract, so none of them have the possibility that they're going to continue being paid during the lockdown. None of them have savings. Most of them have at least some level of debt. Most of them are looking after, more than one person. And so what happens is the moment the factory says, okay, we're going into a lockdown, and so we don't need to go outside and buy food, or, we can't buy lottery tickets, or we can't go to the street vendor, their income drops to zero immediately. And there's no savings in any of these cases. So it immediately means that they're reliant on their neighbors to provide them with food. And fortunately, a lot of people in Vietnam are incredibly good at supporting their neighbors. There is
Yeah.
a proper sense of camaraderie, and I think we've seen people going out into the streets to share food. But of course, you go out into the streets and share food. That's incredible, and it's to be encouraged. But you're giving one person one meal, and then for their next meal, where do they go? Do they come back to you and ask, or do they go and knock on somebody else's door? It's not a way that anybody wants to live. And so that was, what was behind our response. We listened to the people and they just said, we need food. Our number one concern is that we're not going to be able to eat. We're not going to be able to feed our children. And so nothing else really matters. We're an education charity, and a lot of the stuff we do is kind of advanced and complicated. And when it comes to a response to the terrible economic impacts of COVID, it's back to basics. It's food. And as they say, after a year and a half, it's also, as well as the physical well-being, it becomes a little bit more about emotional well-being as well.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we speak to the families when we're delivering, and obviously people are polite. They're going to say thank you, but the appreciation is tangible. It's kind of, I'm not an overly emotional person, but it's quite overwhelming when you see just how much it means, because you're essentially saying, okay, yesterday you didn't know if you would be able to eat. The lockdown is going to go on for at least another 2 weeks. It could be another 2 weeks after that.
Yeah.
And you take away a family's income and all of their possibility of buying food for a month, and it is, it can be extremely damaging. So that's why we're high calorie food, lots of it, and getting it to people as quickly as possible. So I think, um, you know, we know, thankfully, that we're doing the right thing. I think we've delivered something like 1,600 packages to 1,600 families,
Hmm.
um, which is phenomenal. We weren't sure how much we were going to be able to raise. I think so far we've raised and spent. We spend very quickly, about $100,000.
Okay.
And we've had a great response so far, and long may it continue through the lockdown. But yeah, it's just really important at the moment. Those people are so vulnerable; they have
Hmm.
no safety net, and so it's the donations that come from people that, we're spending the money before you receive it, because there's no reason to delay.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well that's kind of a good place to move towards closing. And I mean, you mentioned your website kind of at the start, but just again for people either here in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam or overseas, what are the best ways that they can help you guys do your work?
Yeah, I mean, for us, obviously, donate. Every single dollar that we're receiving for the COVID appeal, we're spending on our COVID relief efforts. As I said, we're spending the money before we receive it, because we'll deal with that accounting issue later on. We're buying the food now, and in fact, in many cases, we bought tons and tons of rice 5 weeks ago before the demand got too great, the prices went up, because we didn't want to be getting in the way of people trying to buy their own food. So please, yeah, go to covid.saigonchildren.com, make a donation there, or you can Google us and donate via the main page. Um, if you want to read a story for our kids, it's a lot of fun. It's very much appreciated. It's a really lovely way to kind of interact with potentially thousands of kids and bring a smile to their face when they're locked down at home. Um, and if, we're not the charity for you, I would say get out, give people food, give people money. If you have a delivery driver come to your house, give them a huge tip. If you have a cleaner or a gardener, anything like that, and you're privileged enough to be able to keep paying them while they're not working, keep paying them. By and large, these people are not in a secure position financially. And if they're not in a secure position financially, they can't feed themselves and their families. If you can't feed your family, it's a really distressing situation with a long-term impact. So be generous, support anyone you see that might need your help. And if you can support Saigon Children with a donation, I can guarantee we'll put it to great use, because we're buying, hundreds of tons of supplies at the best possible prices, and then we're distributing them to 30 different locations. So, as I said, 1,600 families so far. I think last year we helped about 8,000 families. So we're not lacking ambition. We know we can definitely do it. So yeah, I would say help those that you see around you, and if you don't want to go outside and help those, make a donation to Saigon Children.
Okay, well that's great, Damien. Thank you so much. And I'll include those links in the show description as well. And yeah, I mean, thanks for joining and talking about this. Definitely helps keep things in perspective for people like me who, I mean, of course, we're all struggling in different ways right now, but are privileged in the overall, or the grand scheme of things. So thanks for that, and really, really interesting. And I mean, stay safe, you and your team. Y'all are doing incredible work right now.
No, thank you so much. It's it's wonderful when people like you care enough to actually go, how can we help? And then, to encourage others to help, because that's how we'll make a difference. That's how we'll get through the next couple of weeks and hopefully the next couple of months. And yeah, I mean, it's tough for all of us, but if you're privileged enough to be in a situation where you can make a donation, even $10, which you're probably not going to notice too much, can be life changing for a family here who've got no money and no food.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, thanks again, Damien. Much appreciated.
All right. Take care, Mike. Thanks so much.
I'm here with Kelly Vaugh, head of Philanthropy Services at LIN Center here in Ho Chi Minh City. So, Kelly, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me, Mike.
Yeah, and so I just shared your title, but do you want to tell listeners a bit more about what you do and what the LIN Center does?
Yeah. So as you said, my title is head of philanthropy services. So my role is mainly working with company and individual philanthropists who want to engage with the nonprofit community in Vietnam. So LIN Center is a local nonprofit nonprofit. We established in 2009, and our mission is to support grassroots local nonprofit in Vietnam and build the capacity and also ecosystem for local nonprofit Vietnam to develop sustainably. So we have a different kind of services and program to support the local grassroots nonprofit, from information sharing to capacity building training workshop, also leadership training, and funding. To funding, we have to work with different other stakeholder. That's where my role comes in, when I have to go out and talk to corporate and companies and individual who care and they want to engage with the nonprofit and find partnership with a nonprofit. We will talk to them in understand their needs, challenges, and provide the advices, and also connect them with the right partner for their CSR or community development program.
Okay. So there's a lot there, obviously, but I kind of wanted to focus on kind of the specific situation, context we're in right now of the lockdown in Ho Chi Minh City and the overall COVID situation here, which of course is the most serious since the pandemic started. So, kind of in that context, what are you? You came to mind because I saw your Facebook post the other day about asking if people want to get involved with charity organizations helping people here. So, what are you doing in this sense, and what is LIN Center? The partners you work with, like what's going on there?
Yeah. So as you can, as I say earlier, so we support local nonprofit with different kind of program. Sometimes, like especially if since the pandemic happened in 2020, we also have to be very adaptable and also agile about the way we can support a nonprofit, because
Mm-hmm.
for us, we very focus on trying to focus on like long-term solution, building the capacity and long-term capacity for the nonprofit sector. But
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic happened, everybody struggle, they even have to come to a point where they have to survive first. So we also have to adapt to this new situation too. So actually in 2020, when the pandemic just happened a few months, we realized that we had to do something, because most of our nonprofit we support are small grassroots, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a lot of issues about how they can operate during the social lockdown, and also how to raise funds for their support services to the underprivileged community, uh, and which much needed right during the pandemic time. So we had to we have to like do a quick survey right away with our nonprofit partner. Right now in our network, we have around 400 nonprofit partners, and we did
Okay.
a survey with like around 150 of them. And we got the result, and definitely they say that they need funding, they need support, not only money but also skill and volunteers to help them overcome that challenges during the difficult time. So, and then we also did another survey with our donor corporate partners, because we placed like a connector in the hub where everybody can come together, and we find we have to facilitate partnership and connect the resources. So we did a survey with our corporate partners and also individual donor, and many of them say they want to support, right? And we see that clearly there's a need and there's a demand. So that's why we launch our first, we call it like a COVID community response fund. That's where we trying to raise fund for 10 nonprofit in our network, at least 10 nonprofit, and we provided like 50 million per nonprofit for 10 nonprofit for the first phase. We were so very proud and happy about it, because even is in during difficult time, we see that a lot of people care and they want to do something. So as long as we ask, they will help. So that's why we did it. And also we managed to raise another another fund for 20 more nonprofit later on that year, and early this year. So right now since 2020 we provide like some fund for 30 nonprofit already, like around 50 million one nonprofit, to trying to help them at least like pay some operation, because a lot of small nonprofit, they lack of like operation cost. They don't have a lot of reserve fund. When the crisis happen, they're gonna cut a lot of things and they're gonna probably going to close. So that's why we're trying to help them to overcome that situation first. Yeah, and then it is quite hard for a lot of nonprofit to like cut down the activity. They, because of social distancing, they cannot travel. Some of the nonprofit, they travel to work with like local communities. So with the social distancing and also the lockdown, is quite hard for them. To some of them, they have to close or some cut down activity at the moment, and like just laying low, waiting for the situation to get better.
Yeah. So, I mean, what kind of impact does that have on these NGOs or these organizations? I mean, if you're kind of built on being in the community and you can't be in the community, like what do they do?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I mean, we are trying to also did some measurement about the impact from the fund that we provided to the nonprofit, and it takes some time to actually see the impact. Right now, I mean, most of the nonprofit, if they have to travel to the local community, they have to stop it for a moment, like waiting for the situation to get better, or they have to adapt to like online version. Some of the nonprofit, they actually adapted, like they adapt to the online format. Sometimes they do like sharing or section online with their communities, which is good. And they had to. So right now, it's quite hard to have like official measurement and official statistic and situation information about the situation with the local nonprofits in Vietnam. But we heard that they told us they face a lot of challenges, and now they have to be very careful and cut down some activity. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I guess since Directive 16 in particular came into effect almost a week ago now, I mean, what have you seen in terms of either just kind of personally, either in the organizations you work with, or just in terms of what people in the city need? I mean, what are kind of your personal observations from the last week?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, for the Directive 16 for the whole city happening right now is create a lot of concern and worry for a lot of people, especially for the people who come from underprivileged background, and they like informal worker or like working on the street. They lost their job, and they don't know when they can go back to work again. So I feel like a lot of concern, and if you watch the social media activity these days, you see a lot of group, a lot of grassroots nonprofit people coming together and like just personal initiative started something, finding money, raise fund to trying to provide free food to the people affected by the pandemic, especially who are on the street. For example, Food Bank, one of the nonprofit in our network, they are at the beginning before the Directive 16, they are having different kind of kitchen, like they call it love kitchen, cooking free food for people. But since the Directive 16, they have to change the method too, because now they cannot um, operate in different places anymore. So they have to centralize the cooking and also the delivery process. So the founder told me that they have to put it into a big truck and trying to go one round instead of before, like they have a small motorbike cart that with the volunteer to go around the city, but now they have to do it in a more like a bulk quantity to avoid the gathering.
Okay, right. Yeah, I mean, do you know, are there any, um, exceptions or anything for charity organizations when it comes to some of the restrictions? Because I spoke, so also in this episode, I spoke to Damien Roberts, who you know from Saigon Children, and he said that it kind of depended on the district. Like some districts were still letting them go in to deliver things to people in need. Other districts weren't. So do you know, is there any like officially, like how does that kind of work in terms of allowing charity
Mm.
access that you know
Mm.
of?
Yeah, at the beginning, we also worry about this kind of directive that can affect a lot of like charity initiative from the grassroots level. So if you read the news after the directive 16 introduced, I think it's on July 10th or something. There was an accident, like one of the very first 2000 dong concept restaurant. Basically, the restaurant concept is that you can go there buy a very nice quality meal, only 2,000 dong. So this this is the very first restaurant like this in Saigon, founded by Bong Sen Charity Foundation. And because the directive 16 just introduced, so nobody knew what happened, and there was some people asked them to close the restaurant to follow the directive 16. And some people raising like that issues up on the social media, and they wrote a lot about this. And basically they compare that, oh my god, so people going to the supermarket, it also buy essential food, and it's not banned, why people going here also in line, why they be banned or not allowed to open? A lot of people like comment and say we should open, we should let them open, and we should have people to continue this, to do this, to have people in needs, right? So I think one day after that, like the government also step in and say, oh, we didn't say that you cannot like cook for people who need help or in need, but you need to follow or work with the local government. So basically you have to reach out to, if you want to manage this and also operate this, you have to reach out to the local government level. They call it like a people committee or like district level, to get them organized with you. So they will send like a volunteer people to join and organize the group and the people. So that's how they want to like they trying to fix it, because definitely during this time a lot of people are gonna need a lot of food, and then especially they lost the income. So definitely this gonna need to be happen, and that's why the government have to step in and trying to fix that. And some of the nonprofit like Food Bank, for example, they, if they want to deliver food, they have to have like a issue card from the government that say it is the one who provides essential food to the people in need, which is okay to go. But if you don't have that card, then you maybe be stopped and say no, you cannot travel outside.
Right. Okay. Um, so you mentioned, people losing their income, obviously with, certainly street food and that sort of stuff currently not allowed. A lot of people are out of work. So I think even probably for a lot of residents of Ho Chi Minh City who, like me, that are, more privileged, we might not quite realize, what that means if you can't work for what, I mean, 2 weeks, it might be longer than that. We don't know right now. So, you've been out, in these communities and you have experience, you've seen how people live. Like very tangibly, like what does that mean when they can't open, they can't go sell banh mi for 2 weeks or something like that?
Mm. To be honest, I mean, for me, I'm feel very privileged too. I be able to work from home,
Hmm.
and I actually not be able to go out that much because I try to stay at home to follow the regulation. I've been just observing and talking to people, like talking to food bank, talking to nonprofit that helping the people in need during this time. Definitely is very. It's not just about food, but also uncertainty, right? It's about the anxiety around the situation, whether we're gonna be in the lockdown again, whether we're gonna be put into this quarantine center, whether we're gonna get the COVID. It's more than just food. And of course, food is the very essential, and they need it first to survive. But also the atmosphere, the feeling, and if you follow the news, you see a lot of people raising concern. Even they trying to be positive, but they still have a lot of concern, and they're not sure what's going to happen next in the future, in the next few weeks, for example. I think the feeling for the city right now is quite unique. It's quite like one of the lifetime. Yeah, I must say I haven't been to another pandemic before, but I feel like
Yeah.
this is a very like significant for a lot of people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, certainly just, I mean, I haven't left District 2 since last weekend, but just driving around to the supermarket, it's strange. No doubt about that. So I guess just a couple more questions. So right now, I mean, you mentioned that LIN Center has helped to get funding together for a lot of different NGOs and organizations over the last year. Kind of like right now in this hard lockdown, what are you focusing on?
We continue to so actually we actually starting to launch the phase 4 soon. Phase 3, sorry, phase 3 to raise fund for local nonprofits. Continue to support them. It's not just about right now, but after that, like recovery time.
Hmm.
And also, if you, I think you already know that we recently we're trying to collect information from the grassroots level and volunteer group. The reason is because if you read social media, you see a lot of groups started and trying to cook free food, provide free stuff for the people, but it's quite all over the places. And a lot of donors, they don't know where, especially people, if they don't speak the language, it's quite hard for them to actually verify and also see whether that's actually need help. So
Hmm.
what we're trying to do, and then we also talk to a lot of people. I share that on my LinkedIn and Facebook. Just one day I got so much interest. People just say, yes, I would like to support, I would like to support. I think that's where Lin role play very well, because we like a connector and the hub where people can find information. So that's why we recently working very hard to get all the information in place, verified it, because this is the information we want to share with our donors and network. So we're gonna publish hopefully tomorrow morning. We're trying to finish everything, and then people can go there and look at through the list like a directory, and then they can donate to the nonprofit that they think that makes sense for them. So that's what we're trying to do for like urgent matter, like food and essential. But beside that, the phase 3 COVID response fund for nonprofit, we're trying to help them longer with like funding and also capacity building. We still have to also run our program. We still have 2 programs to run this year.
Mm.
For example, the Narrow the Gap one, Narrow the Gap Community Fund. This is our signature program where we provide funding to nonprofit addressing different issues in Vietnam. This year will be environment and people. So of course the attention right now go to COVID, but a
Sure.
lot of issues still happening, like for example climate change and
Yeah.
education. So that's why we trying to adapt to this new situation and trying to get the fund out so people can have it, and then they can address the issue as the community. Beside that, we also have like annual conference and a cross-sector conference where we bring people together to share case study about partnership and connect with the potential partner. We still have to organize it, and trying to get people, at least giving some sort of like positive, inspirational information, and give people a chance to connect with each other. So that's what we're doing right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's really important. I know it's. I mean, for me as someone who's looking at the news basically all day, it's pretty overwhelming. It's just COVID, 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 which is of course important, but yeah, sometimes you need reminded that there's other really important stuff happening. That's kind of a good place to move towards closing. So you mentioned the list that LIN Center is putting together of charities, and I wonder, which is why we're here. I've had people message me like, "Hey, I'm interested in trying to donate, but I'm not sure. Like, how do I know I can trust an organization? That kind of stuff." So if somebody does want to help, whether they're here in Vietnam or overseas, I mean, are there some
Mm.
organizations you want to recommend? I don't want
Mm.
you to play favorites, but is there anybody in particular that you think is really worth supporting?
Well, I mean, depends on what they want to support, right? We're collecting right now, I think 24, and they some the will provide essential food, some even provide like support with mental health,
Mm.
counseling, and everything. So I think it's so important. This during this time, I just got a message from a friend. She just asked me whether some sort of somewhere can support the cleaner because the cleaner gonna lost their job too,
Yeah.
lose their job because they cannot go to other people to work, to other
Hmm.
people house to work. So I feel that very a lot of people need help. So that's why we want to combine a list together and then see, okay, this nonprofit support this group at this area, for example,
Okay.
and what they're gonna do. And then if you see that is related to what your interest and your passion, you can also support them. We have a lot of lists now, and we're trying to publish early tomorrow. And if you want to donate, we're very happy that you can donate directly to the group that we share. If you can also send us a feedback or a comment, we would be very appreciated. Also, if you see, okay, this is information, but I want to dig deeper, I want to understand more, I want to work more than this, like donate more than this or help more than this, then just reach out to me and to Lynn. We can also set up a call with you and ask more question and also understand more the needs, and then we can connect it with the right people and maybe help you facilitate a partnership.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I mean, if this episode goes out before that list, you publish the list, I'll be sure to share it on social media and in the newsletter in the future. Because I think a lot of people will find that useful, myself included. Um,
Mm.
yeah, well, that's great. So, I mean, Kelly, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me, and hope you stay safe and healthy and sane during this.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the opportunity and also thoughtful about this situation to let me share about nonprofit communities in Vietnam facing the pandemic. So I hope that more people will listen to this episode and understand and also provide some support, have giving a hand to the people in need in Vietnam.
Yeah, I hope so too. And actually, sorry, one more thing. I should mention that you have your own podcast. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So, do you just want to briefly mention that?
Sure. Thank you. So basically, I just started not just but like last year into October, I started my own podcast show named Dear Our Community. So it's focused on two key things. First is social impact. The second is using storytelling. So I'm interview local people leaders who trying to create positive impact in Vietnam in their own way, from like educational, youth development, gender equality, climate change, for example. So they overcome the challenges and they're trying to do something to contribute. It's like a letter to the community, right?
Mm.
I hope that through this kind of content, a lot of people, especially young Vietnamese, young generation, they can see a lot of inspiration, and they also can reflect about what they want to do and find their own path to make a difference in Vietnam. So that's what we hope to achieve from this podcast.
Okay, great. And I'll be sure to share a link to DRR community in the show description as well.
Awesome.
So yeah, Kelly, thanks again, and take care.
Yes, take care. You too. Stay safe, Mike.